Hey, folks, I hope you're having a fantastic day today. So, you ever have one of those experiences where you just run across someone and you immediately hit it off and they become your best friend? Maybe not best friend, but you really click and you're in sync. Well, I'll tell you what, today's guest, Dennis Torres, Professor Dennis Torres, it was one of those guys. I mean, from the second that we got on, it's like, wow, this guy I'm in sync with. I got to say I'm in sync with him because he would be my senior. He's not a senior, but he is a senior, but he is older than I am. So, that's the type of person you look up to. That's the type of person that you learn and, you get to have a chance of living through some of their experiences. But what we're going to do today is we're going to have a conversation. He has a series of books out, and the latest one is called The Course: Acquiring Wealth, Power, Success, Morally and Ethically. And it's in his series of books that's called A Life Well Lived. So, again, we just clicked right away, and I was in sync with what he was thinking. He was in sync with what I was thinking. It was a fantastic conversation. And I hope you get a lot out of this because this really talks about life and not expectations, but how we can really grab a hold of the things that we want and how we can really make life the way we want to make it. We create our own life, we create our own destiny. And this, again, is one of those podcasts, one of those guests that I truly was in sync with. So if you're ready, let's get into it. But you know what I always say before we do that? If you are a pet owner, please be responsible pet owner and have your pets spayed or neutered. All right, now let's get into it. Once you stop learning, or once you think you know everything, it's game over, and it really isn't because there's no way that you're going to know everything um, there is to know. There's too many people to meet, too many places to go.
And now you understand why I've had 64 jobs and careers plus, I should say, in my life.
Yeah, that was going to be one of my questions is to Professor Dennis Torres. How is it that you've had 64 career paths? Now, I mean,
You know
that's,
the answer to that because you're the same type of person and you have that curiosity. And,
yeah.
thing led to another, and I think I've only been fired from one or two jobs out of those 64. And there's actually been more than 64, but I figured enough is enough here. I've been putting down there. So.
I think I'm about the same. I can't say how many um, careers that I've had or jobs, but definitely been fired from like maybe like you two. Um, and then the others I've walked out on, and then I've come back, knocked on the door, and said, "Hey, I'm ready to come back." And they're like, "Okay, come on back." And one was
Yeah.
because I had to go to Disneyland.
Okay. So
uh,
here's what led me to put down the 64. For 12 years, I taught at Pepperdine University. I spent 30 years at Pepperdine as an administrator, and 12 of those as an administrator and professor in the full-time MBA program. And my students often said, "Geez, professor, you've had so many experiences, you know," and they would ask questions about it. So one of my flights back from D.C., I had to go to D.C. on business several times a year. So one of the flights back there, I don't know, popped in my mind. I should write down and see how many I remember. And then I could, which I did, and then I typed them up and I would project them on the wall there for the students because they had been curious and asked me. I listed them all, and part of that was to let them know that they don't have to stay in one job for the rest of their life or one career. They should follow their passions and their interests so that their life is more fulfilled. And anyway, that's how I ended up listing them and putting them on for the benefit of the students.
y- I want to make sure that people know, first of all, that you are a professor. But second, I mean, you're an author of several books, but I think your latest one is what the course, acquiring
Yeah.
wealth, power, success, morally and ethically. So, and a lot of people are probably going to wonder, well, how is it that we throw in morally and ethically, about the power and wealth,
Well, I'll explain that.
especially, yeah, especially because of what we see and hear on the news these days. If people are thinking monetarily, wealthy, but I think there's more than just a monetary wealth.
Yeah. Well, I'll explain now that. So I was teaching two courses in the full-time MBA program. One was called Negotiation and Resolution of Business Disputes, because I have a advanced degree as a media in dispute resolution from the Strauss Institute of Dispute Resolution, which was number one program at the Pepperdine Law School, and number one in the country. And the other course I taught was Global Finance, during which I would take the students to New York to visit Goldman Sachs and Deutsche Bank and all those, and then take them subsequently on the same trip to Washington to meet with the World Bank and the IMF and a couple of the other organizations, the International Chamber of Commerce. So one day the dean said to me, "We don't have a course on ethics. Would you teach ethics?" And I said, "Okay." And so, having not taught ethics before, I wrote to several colleagues in different universities then and said, "How do you teach it? What's your syllabus like? What textbooks are you using?" And I started doing research on a good way to teach ethics. So and by the way, my colleagues in different universities were very generous with the information, but I didn't like what I saw. And in my research on the internet about ethics, I came across something that basically research showed that by the time a student reaches graduate level in college, they've been told what's right and wrong so many times that it's basically a waste of time to just regurgitate back to them, this is right, this is wrong. So I decided I would base the ethics instead of saying this is right and this is wrong, because different cultures think certain things are right and other things are wrong. And my students at Pepperdine were roughly 50% foreign nationals. Okay. So in their different cultures, for example, plagiarism for my Chinese students was not wrong. It was a big no-no at Pepperdine, okay, and maybe now at Harvard, given the latest things. But it's not wrong in China because the only thing that counted in China was getting an A. Because if you didn't get A's, you could not get into the good universities or any university. And it also, if you didn't get the top grades, it humiliated you and your family. It fell on the families too. So basically the culture was do whatever you can to get the A and don't worry about anything else. Also, their culture said plagiarism is why reinvent the wheel. Okay, there's no point in reinventing the wheel if it's already out there. So they had culturally a different attitude about plagiarism. And of course, the different customs and traditions in different countries. Some countries it was okay to eat dogs. Our culture, no. Here we eat hamburgers. In certain Hindu cultures, and for my Hindu students, obviously they didn't eat cows, okay, because they were sacred. And so I decided to approach ethics as a action and consequence for action rather than right or wrong. So when you choose an action and make a decision, you also choose the consequence. Okay, and and to approach an ethics from that standpoint. So if they decided to, for instance, cheat somebody, they have to bear the consequences of cheating. Rather than look at it as right or wrong, you're just choosing the consequence. And is that what the consequence that you want to suffer in your own life? Leave that up to them. So that's where. So then I had to come up with a name for the course, and ethics. There aren't too many people who want to take a course on ethics unless it was required. So I had to come up with a title that would entice the students' curiosity to come to the class. And most of the graduate students, if not all of them, they looked at the success as making money. Okay, so that's where I came up with the title, and the way it worked at Pepperdine and probably other universities is, if you have a new course, it's not listed in the catalog until it's proven that enough students want to take it. And so the name I gave it attracted a lot of students. Normally, it would take a couple of years before it would be listed in the catalog, because the first year usually you'd get 3 or 4 students with a new course, and maybe if they liked it they would tell other students, and the next time you taught it you get 5 or 6. Mine was packed from day one, and the students would tell other students they had to take it, and so it was a very successful course. That's where I came up with the title, Acquiring Wealth, Power, Success Morally and Ethically, or as we called it, AWP SME. Okay. Anyway, long story of how that came about, and the book, The Course, is based on that.
Okay. So then your book is really, it's a self-help but not a self-help book.
Yes. And it definitely, when it came to the wealth part, I go into the tried and true formula, which, barring surprises in life, is virtually a guarantee to create wealth, even if you only make minimum wage. And I introduced into the course a lot of examples of people who only made minimum wage in their life and ended up to be very wealthy, millions of dollars wealthy. And that is to live below your means and invest the rest. And I gave them examples of how they could do that in their own life. Okay,
Yeah.
and that's covered in that's what's covered in the book too. I believe that anybody who follows what is covered in that book can create wealth in their life. And it's not about the money. It's more about the giving yourself choices. That when you have financial resources, it gives you choices. Do I want to work now full time or part time? Do I want to put my efforts in one activity rather than just the activity of getting a paycheck?
So well, it sounds like it's kind of like a lifestyle choice.
Yes.
Would that be accurate? Okay.
Yeah. Sometimes the students, and this is in the book too, sometimes the students will say, "Oh, that's professor. It's all good and for you to say this, but I have, 20,000 or 50,000 in student debt to pay off." And I would tell them things like, "Well, if you," I said, "you go out and buy a $6 or $7 Starbucks once or twice a day, and we offer free coffee here at the university, in the student lounge. Uh, you do the math. If you saved $7 or $15 a day getting the free coffee or bringing it from home, uh, it would pay off your student loan." Okay. So it's not overwhelming. Two of the exercises that are in the course is one which I I was very surprised the students loved it because they learned so much from it. But I told them one of the assignments is to not spend 1 cent an entire day. Okay, you can go and plan ahead, like filling your car with gas or getting food in your refrigerator, but do not spend 1 cent for an entire day. And what they learned from that, they loved it. They realized from it how they spent their money and how they wasted. The other part of that was to on a separate day, to catalog every penny you spent for the day, and they saw how much they wasted. Okay, without even thinking about it. Okay. So,
So this is like a lot of practical how-tos, practical what you need to do in order to um, find that end goal. Uh,
yes,
you know,
exactly.
So, the one thing it's I'm already thinking in my head of the word, but I want to say that a lot of times people come up with an excuse or a reason, and you've kind of already led to that fact. But a lot of times people nowadays will say, "Well, I don't have enough money, or I don't make enough money to save," which in turn for me is kind of like a lifestyle choice. Like you said, you don't need to go out and get a $6 or $7 coffee. There's free coffee here, or there's a $1.23 coffee um, right next door to that $7 coffee shop kind of thing.
Exactly. And it's interesting that to not only when they had to catalog everything they spent for a day, when you look at people, it amazed me. For example, recently I read that people went out and got second and third part-time jobs just to save the money to go to a Taylor Swift concert because the tickets were whatever $1,000 or something. Okay.
Yeah.
And I have nothing against music or Taylor Swift, but they don't realize that if they had taken that same money, and this is not necessarily for life, but if they had taken the money and invested it, okay, and the investment starts with putting $10 here and $10 there. It's a combination of being aware, okay, or they go out, it's very popular now to go get tattoos, okay, well, tattoos are not inexpensive, okay. Where do you spend your money and what are your priorities? To make small
Yeah.
sacrifices in the beginning, okay. We also covered in the course a book that a friend of mine made me aware of years ago. So she brought up, she and her husband brought up their two daughters with this book. It was written by an accountant in Australia, and I'll give him a plug. I don't remember his name, but I know the book. Well, the title of the book is "How to Give Your Children $1 million each, and it won't cost you 1 cent." And the title sounds crazy, but his plan and everything is accomplishes exactly what he says in the title. How you can give your children $1 million each and not cost you 1 cent, and anybody can do that. Okay, and it's basically the same thing I was teaching in the course. Is you put money away, and what I would tell the students is this: open up a linked account. Okay, so you have your bank account where you pay your bills, your checking account, whatever, and it should be linked to another savings account. And every time that you live below your means, you're going to have something left over, $10, $20, $50, whatever. Send it to that linked account and forget it. And when that linked account has enough money in there, $100 or 300 or 500 or 1,000, then you make an investment. Okay, and you never take anything out of that investment. You let it grow to a point where now your money will work for you instead of you having to work for the money.
The thing about all this and with the finances and people going in and spending money on tattoos and concerts, we've gotten to that point where people we're an immediate society. We like things immediately, that immediate gratification, and that's more so less with you and I, and maybe folks who are at least 50 or 60 and things like that. Um, it's the other thing too is I think a lot of students, even college graduates nowadays, don't understand about financing money and what compounded interest means. And
Exactly.
if you realize what compounded interest is, you will go, "Oh my gosh, I should have started saving $10 because it compounds." $10 is low, but wouldn't you think that compounding interest and everything, like you said, it accumulates over the years? Start early.
Absolutely. Yeah, and we go into the difference between frugality and being cheap.
Hmm.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm going back to that mindset and a habit of changing certain things in your lifestyle. If you could look at the overall big picture and look at the end goal, what do you want at the end? A lot of people when they're three-quarters of the way there, they go, "Oh, I want to retire early." Well, you should have thought about it at the starting point, not three-quarters of the way through.
Yeah,
But I mean that. Go ahead.
the mentality of the students, and I loved my students. In fact, I keep in touch with them all over the world. I'm able to make calls using WhatsApp and whatever to different countries around the world where my students are, and I'm following their. And it's fun to see that they're getting married and having children, and the careers. Time passes so rapidly, but the they follow the plan, and I get some. All this is in the book too. Feedback from the students. All of a sudden, hey professor, you may not remember me, but I took your course 10 years ago, and I want to let you know I paid off my student loan in such and such a year, and I now have $1 million in the bank following this, and I bought myself a new car, but I paid all cash because as a present to myself, I get these type of things all the time from students, and it's a thrill using what they learned in the class. Okay.
Yeah, and it is all you can accomplish these things. I know it's difficult, and again, I'm going to say that uh, people in general today will say it's so expensive. I can't do this. I can't do that. I can't save. But it's just trying to make that adjustment, whatever little adjustments you can, to be able to save a little bit. Even I remember my father telling me, put 10% aside, pay yourself 10% out of your paycheck and put it aside. I used to be the guy that said, I can't. I don't make enough. But I realized later on uh, that you can and that you should. It's just a lifestyle change.
Yeah, it was a generational thing. Your parents and my parents, came from humble beginnings, and they learned not to waste their money because it was difficult to make it, and took a lot of time. And frugal living is fun. You have less pressure on you. You need
Yeah.
a new refrigerator. The car breaks down. It's not a life and death thing, or you have to go to a pay check, one of those check cashing payday loans, and or banks high interest loans, or making minimum payment on credit cards. Uh, Once you learn this and you alter your habits, the pressures in life, and I should say the enjoyment. People think that they have to buy pleasure, and they run here and it's over very quickly, and they run there, and
Yeah.
to spending a lot of money on things that they think are pleasurable, and maybe they are for an instant, but the consequence, the pay of doing those things is that they're always on a treadmill in life.
Yeah. There is one thing that I'll say that people should save their money or spend their money on, but aside from paying themselves, put that extra money aside, is travel and learn culture from other cultures. I think that's important. That enriches your life. And also, I think it can make you realize, oops, I don't need all that stuff because I'm here and they don't have near as much as what I have at home, but they look like they're having a good life.
Yeah, and I'm glad you said that, because if you look at my jobs and if you look at my other books, I'll give a self plug there. One of my novels is called The Amazon of Ray Goldberg Rivera. I don't know if you saw it or you read the synopsis of it, but when I get back from Vietnam, uh, I had to get a job, obviously, and so I looked in those days, the when you wanted a job, you looked in the want ads in the newspaper, and all the jobs, understandably, were entry level jobs, commission jobs, selling insurance.
Hmm.
I, I was never a suit and tie type of guy, and I didn't want to go out and sell people insurance. That, to me, it wasn't my thing. So then I saw an ad in the travel section, because I like travel, as you mentioned here, you like travel, and it said, want to explore the Amazon. And I said, that sounds good to me. And through that, it was a woman who put that ad in, and she got a small payment for putting people together and telling them how they can travel to the Amazon and make money. I didn't care about the money, to be honest with you, but I used that as a good excuse to go to the Amazon. Some of the jobs that she said, or ways you could make money, is you could dig up pre-Columbian artifacts in Latin America, bring them back with you and sell them to collectors. Another client started an orchid farm in Central America and was selling orchids. Other people were taking scuba equipment and diving in the rivers for gold. And there were several different ways that she showed that you can do it. I just wanted the adventure. And what I learned on going through the different cultures in different countries there gave me great lessons in life of how you can live very simply, for example, and have a very fulfilling life, and how you would not judge one culture against another culture, that everybody has a certain amount of days to live, and how you spend those days. A good friend of mine died. I'm not going to mention the name there, but he was a world known celebrity. Uh, and He was worth many hundreds of millions of dollars when he died. And he was a humble person, I might say that. He never did what a lot of celebrities do, buy yachts and all that stuff. He lived very simply, but well. Um,
Mhm.
and When he died, I was walking into class when the news came out that I heard that he had passed away. And in that moment, I said, he doesn't own even his underwear in the drawer. Okay, he owns nothing, and that's the way we all go out. As somebody said, there's no U-Haul behind a hearse. Okay, and if people keep that in mind, I think that they would look for more enrichment in their life and more happiness in their life and more joy than they would pleasure. There's a
Yeah,
difference between joy and pleasure, and travel
there
helps you
is.
see that. Yeah, yeah. There's a in my course I would in the book The Course, and in the course I taught there, I have an example of a anthropologist who was with the University of Pennsylvania, and he lived for many years with one of the most primitive tribes in the Amazon. And ultimately, he ended up marrying one of the tribal women, and the explanation of how that came about is in there. And they had a son. And when he went back to the University of Pennsylvania, he brought his wife and child with him. Well, his wife couldn't adjust because she grew up, there were no roads, no communication. In fact, even in their language, they didn't have any numbers beyond two. You had one, two, and then after that it was many. That was their counting, and they ate tarantulas and things like that. So she went back because she couldn't adjust. But he raised his son in Philadelphia, and his son just became like most Americans or most people in this culture, as if he were born here. So, and then the son would go back and visit it as an adult. His son would go back and visit his mother in the tribe over there. So he learned to appreciate both cultures, what they got out of it. And Again, the goal in life is to find the joy and the sameness that unite all of us.
Yeah. Um, we're talking about the mindset. We're talking about travel and everything, but also going to say, I don't know how or where, but it seems like the younger generation of today don't want to work as much. That's one. Feel entitled, so they're not going to take a job that is an entry level job, and then therefore they're saying I don't have money to save. But they're doing all the wrong things. Oh, let me rephrase that or correct that. I can't say that they're doing all the wrong things. They're probably not doing the things that's going to help them later on. Um,
Yeah. I'm going
how
to
and
accuse
why?
I'm going to accuse you of being a mind reader because you're reading
Okay.
exactly my mind. Okay. Most of my students, their goals in life, and they're great people. I'm not putting them down. It's a
Yeah.
generation thing. Okay. Their goal was, if they were a marketing student, they didn't want to go out and produce anything. It was all about branding, okay? And branding didn't even have to have a product. All you had to do was make a name for yourself and make money off of the name, a brand. Okay, the finance students, their goal was, I'm going to when I leave here, I'm going to do a hedge fund, and I'm going to be make $1 billion in 3 years, and then quit work and travel. And then there was other students. I'm going to create an app, and I'm going to make $1 billion off my app. These were their goals. Okay, I only want to work a few years, get rich, and that's it. Okay, so and I said, yeah, it happens, but it happens to very, very few people. Okay,
Yeah.
and okay,
You
so
know,
don't count on it.
right. Part of this is we've lost um what I would say is critical thinking. You're
Yes,
not really you're not looking at the consequences. You're not critically thinking about your actions today and what the consequences are going to be later.
see,
Does that
you're,
make any
you're reading my
sense?
mind. You're reading my mind. That the course is a critical thinking course.
Okay.
Okay, and that's what we taught, critical thinking. Okay, and by the way, for your audience who may not know some of the jobs I've had, because the diversity of the jobs,
Yeah.
I was a big rig truck driver. I was a commercial pilot, airplane pilot, a commercial airplane pilot, and I ran a merry-go-round on the Santa Monica Pier, which is a iconic ride. Uh, the God, I'm trying to think now. I was an industrial engineer. I graduated the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York in my undergraduate, and was an industrial engineer in the garment industry. As I tell people, the garment industry used to be called software. Okay, so I told people I was a software engineer before there was software. Okay, so and
Wow.
yeah, okay, and of course a professor, and I had many labor jobs. I was a waiter. I was a cook. Um, God, I'm trying to think of even 64. I've got to go back there in my mind and think of all the different jobs. But I had the diversity of of having physical labor jobs and intellectual jobs. And I like to work, even now.
Mhm.
I don't shy from work. I enjoy work. I'm not one to sit around and do nothing. And if I could, I was at a restaurant, local restaurant the other day, and restaurants here are always, they're having labor problems because they said nobody wants to work. So I saw the owner of the restaurant filling in as a waiter, and I said, "Gee, I ought to help him there. I know how to wait tables. I could even bust the tables, and it wouldn't bother me. I'd be happy to help him."
Yeah.
Okay, so
Well,
and
yeah, people
and maybe
peop
go ahead. I'm
oh, I
sorry.
was gonna say,
Go ahead.
no, that's all right. I was gonna say, people talk about being rich, but there's other things to do to enrich your life. And like you said, you had a skill. I could go out there and I could wait, or I could bust, help the guy. You're enriching your life by doing something.
Sure, I'm happy to wait on people, make their experience happy. um, and helping somebody out, just sitting around, is not my thing. One of the jobs I had too when I got back from the Amazon, uh, I got a job for the Pacific Telephone and PT&T on the Pacific Telephone anyway, and they hired me as what is called an out rep. Okay, in those days, the Public Utilities Commission said that the phone company could not shut off somebody's phone service for non-payment unless they were notified in person that this was going to be a consequence. And so the job I had as an out rep, I had to go and notify people in person. I didn't have to collect money. If they offered it to me, the company said you could, of course, accept it, but you don't have to collect it. And my territory was one of the poorest neighborhoods. It was basically a welfare neighborhood in Los Angeles. And in my training, the teacher at the phone company that trained me said, "Look, people see you." It was an African American neighborhood, so she said when they see a white person in the neighborhood, they know that you're there for not a good purpose. And she said they may try to jump behind a car when you're parking it to get hit so they could sue us. And she said if they offer you a drink, take it and then call us and we'll pick you up so that you don't get into a confrontation. And the and they hired me because I was white. My boss was African American. Okay, so I said, why don't you hire an African American? And they said, because they won't take him seriously. And so I was so enriched in working in that neighborhood. I loved the people. I started dating somebody from the neighborhood, and it was a wonderful experience. But one thing that one good lesson I learned out of that was, because a lot of the people did not leave their neighborhood, and because they had grown up essentially in welfare, especially the second generation, because the first generation people worked very hard, menial jobs, whatever, but the next generation was happy to just collect the welfare and do what they could. So I met one day two boys who were about my age, in their 20s. And out of curiosity, I said, "What are you guys planning for your future? Where do you see yourself going?" And I was shocked when they told me, "We want to be shoe shine guys." And by the way, I have nothing against shoe shine. I think the guys at the airport shining shoes make a lot of money, and they get to meet interesting people, and they take pride in their end result. So nothing against it. But what popped in my mind is these guys were athletic, in their 20s, good looking, but I realized that they were in a prison of what they had grown up in. Why would I want to be shoe shine boys? Because they didn't know anybody who didn't aspire to more or end up going more. They didn't know that they could do anything they wanted to do because they were never told that in their neighborhood. And that's in my book called Not Far from the Ocean. It's one of the events in Not Far from the Ocean. And I chose that title because many people in that ghetto, okay, that welfare ghetto in Los Angeles, I was shocked to find that they had never seen the ocean, which was maybe a 25-cent bus ride away. But they never left their neighborhood. Their whole world was that neighborhood. And their outlook in life was locked into that neighborhood. And it's tough to break out in life if you don't know any different. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, you're giving some really great examples, and that goes back to what we are talking about earlier about, you know, if you're gonna, for me, if you're gonna spend some money, put it towards something meaningful that's gonna give you memories that last, and that's travel that allows you to learn and you see other cultures. Um, that, again, we're gonna use that word enriches. It enriches your life. So, it's, I just want to, again, make sure that people know that your book, your latest one, is called The Course: Acquiring Wealth, Power, Success, Morally and Ethically. And what was it? AW.
AWP
Yeah,
SME.
there
SME.
we go. I keep getting stuck on the Amazon, the AWS thing.
Yeah, so
So,
the four
uh,
novels, the four novels I put out so far is, of course, the Amazon of Ray Goldberg Rivera, which is the adventures of three people going to the Amazon. And by the way, I went to the Amazon. She put me together. She said, "Okay." She told me you can drive down the Pan American Highway and sell your car. I had a '62 Volkswagen Beetle. She said you can get twice as much for it if you take it to Panama than you could selling it here and taking the money. And my concept was, all right, I'm going to sell it for double in Panama. I'm going to take that money to live on while I explore South America. And she called me up and said, "I'm going to fix you up with somebody else who will help share the expense." So she fixed me up with a surfer, a 21-year-old surfer who had never been out of California before, but he had a reason he wanted to leave. Okay, but he had never been. I was in Vietnam. Okay, so I had a little experience in jungles and whatever. And then just before we left, she said, "I got another person who wants to go," and that person was a Bible thumping girl from Louisiana. Okay, so. We were strangers and we had different cultures and thoughts there, and we headed off on a great adventure and it was a great adventure because the Pan American Highway was not even complete in those days. Okay, so that was the one book. Then after that, I wrote a book called "There Are No Good Giants," and that is a story of my experiences in Vietnam. and I didn't want to write about shooting and killing. Okay, unfortunately, there's some of that in there, but the bulk of the book is about the culture. Okay, what I learned from the people of Vietnam, what I learned about how people live under the sword of war and continue on their life by getting married and having children and getting their children educated and doing their job and feeding themselves all around while the war is raging in their very front yards, and about the culture of Vietnam, and a very rich culture that it is. And then I did the one on not far from the ocean, which covers 4 different jobs that I had when I came back from the Amazon. The one that I just mentioned with the phone company, another one, I was a letter carrier. See, that one I forgot to mention there. I was a mailman in Santa Monica. Wonderful experience. Then ran the merry-go-round, and then I ended up moving to Hollywood, which is not far from Santa Monica, and became a writer for the #1 underground newspaper in the country, and magazines covering rock stars, the top rock stars of the era. And I'm not big into rock stars, but so my slant in writing about them was them as people and their experience as people rather than their next big hit. Okay. So, and then of course the fourth book being the course that you mentioned.
Yeah, I want to make sure your book is available on Amazon. I'm sure on Barnes and Noble, a lot of different places. But if somebody's going to Google and try to find it, would they put professor or would they just put Dennis Torres author? What's the easiest way to get more info
Okay.
on you?
Well, it's in Ingram Sparks, which is a catalog that all bookstores order from, and of course Amazon. And my the 4 books are under a Life Well Lived collection. Because in Amazon, rather than having people search for 4 different types of books, if you call your books a series and give that series a title, then they will all be on the same page if somebody looks for 'em. So I think if they go to Amazon and put down Dennis Torres, Torres, the course, then they'll see all 4 books.
Okay. Well, there's a tip for some future authors out there. Put it in the series.
Yeah.
So,
They have to come up with a name for the series. I said, "How about a life well lived?" Okay, so it was shooting from the hip.
one thing that you just mentioned just a couple minutes ago, and is experiences, life experiences, and that's one thing also, or another thing that I've come to learn from friends who have kids in that age bracket. They're not looking for life experiences, or their life experiences, as you kind of said with that group. It's just within their city or their town, or wherever they could walk to. Because so many of them now, they don't get a license until they're 25.
Yeah,
Because at that time they figure, oh, I have to, or my friends who used to drive me are married, so they can't now, or whatever it may be. But there's so many things that are generational that just baffles my mind. And it's everything that you're talking about and everything that's in your book. So I hope that people listen to this podcast, watch this podcast, get your book, and change their mindset.
I didn't blame my students. I learned, by the way, I taught because not only felt an obligation to pass on my experiences for whatever they're worth. In fact, I kept telling my students, you don't have to believe a thing I say. All I want you to do is maybe experiment in your life and see if it's meaningful to you, if it works for you. Don't, I'm not preaching to you. I'm sharing my experience. And what I also taught because I was learning from the new generation. Okay, I want to
Hmm.
know how they see life, what I can learn from them. And I saw that they were sort of handicapped by their experience. And I don't blame parents, or blame is waste to me. Okay, the blame is nothing that's going to be productive. But in their efforts for their parents to do two things in life that were different from your parents and mine, and I'm reading into from what you said about how you grew up is similar to how I grew up. Parents decided, well, I'm going to work hard, I'm going to sacrifice because I want my children to have a better life or better life experience than I did. But unfortunately, in their efforts to do that, they deprive their children of the satisfaction of working and getting experience and self-sufficiency. Because many of my students were brought up, and I think you can see that a lot today. Instead of saying, okay, I started working at 10 years old, polishing furniture in a furniture store, and then I had other jobs, handing out flyers, delivering newspapers, selling cookbooks door to door. Instead of sending them out to work early in life, they have soccer practice, piano practice, dance practice, and on, all paid for by the parents. When they need a car, the parents buy them a car because kid never worked. They need a computer, they get a computer, and consequently, these students were handicapped.
Yeah.
Okay, all they knew is when you need something, you get it. Okay, I need it, so I get it. Okay, and that was a very big disadvantage. I loved working. Yes, they were tired, and people were irritated with you. You were irritated with them. Yes, but learning new things and meeting new people and I learned so much from my different jobs, and unfortunately, these students didn't have that experience. Okay,
Yeah.
and so they live at home. In my generation, probably in yours too, when you graduated high school, out you went. You get an apartment, you get a job, you get an apartment, okay, and you make your own here. You learn how to
Yeah.
cook, learn how to iron, whatever. So
We had responsibilities. Yeah, now I understand why and how Christmas is in July. It's every day now for for people growing up. I want, they get. So hey, it's Christmas every single day now.
yeah,
But
so I
it's
became, I became a, say, how did I get to be a commercial pilot? Okay, well, when I was with that phone company, and I told you a woman trained me as to how to work out in the field, and in the course of the training, she happened to mention a little bit of her history. First of all, this woman looked like a librarian. Okay, nothing negative about a librarian, but she didn't look like the person that she was going to expose to me. About her history. She was a member of Jacqueline Cochran's group of female pilots during World War II. And their job was during World War II, all the men who were pilots had to be flying in the different theaters in the war. So, how did the manufacturers get the airplanes from the factory to the military bases? Uh, and that was done with Jacqueline Cochran put together a group of females, and their job was to pick up the military planes and fly it to the bases so that the men would have the planes. And this teacher was one of those. And so she was flying P-51 Mustangs, for example. Well, the P-51 Mustang, which is a propeller aircraft, at that time, World War II, is the equivalent of our most advanced fighter jets. Okay, and I'm looking at this librarian and seeing her flying, again, the equivalent today of our uh, our best fighter jets, and it didn't jive. So that, her telling those stories of her flying those planes and looking at her, the next day, I got home that evening, I looked in the yellow pages and I looked up flight schools. And that Saturday, I went down to a flight school, and I didn't have any money, but they had an arrangement with the local bank to give me a loan, okay, so that I could take the flying lessons. And I went in, I got my private license, then I went and got my commercial pilot's license, my instrument rating, my multi-engine rating, flight instructor rating, and I went on, and ultimately it was that curiosity from meeting that teacher that propelled me into that aspect of my life.
There's so many keywords that you've been using, at least keywords to me throughout our entire conversation, that I think um, folks are lacking. Another one you just used is curiosity. So much of this has gone away, or it just seems like it has. Um, I have a comment and maybe a couple of last questions, if you wouldn't mind trying to answer them for me. Uh, well, what, comment question, and keep it simple then, is we know that it's a different time and we know that there are difficulties. We understand that. You and I understand that. But there are things that you can still do. So, my real question is, can anybody do what we're talking about? Can they accomplish these things? And maybe how can they do that?
Good question. My answer is yes. Anybody can accomplish. I don't care if you have one leg or missing limbs. As a matter of fact, let me throw this out to you. One of the friends that I met later in life is famous for his condition. He was born without limbs, and the name of his organization is Life Without Limbs. And he goes, so here's somebody. He's ethnically Serbian, grew up in Australia, and he wanted to die many times in his life because he had no limbs, no arms or legs. Uh, and the interesting thing about him is what he was able to accomplish in life. He taught himself how to play golf, how to swim, how to surf. And as far as economics go, he makes several millions of dollars a year traveling around the world, speaking to people of what they can accomplish. And he uh, he ended up marrying a very, very gorgeous woman, and they have 5 children. So here's somebody,
Wow.
no limbs in life, okay, has a beautiful family, beautiful wife, beautiful family, makes millions of dollars a year. Uh, and so you say, can anybody accomplish? Yes, the answer is yes. One of the big handicaps to that is what we were just mentioning before is you're probably locked into a prison of thought, lacking experience and lacking knowledge of other things in life that would add joy and money. Okay, so this is all discussed in the course, by the way, to broaden your vision in life so that you can accomplish anything that you want. Okay. So I hope that answers that question.
It does, and to add to simplify everything is it's a mindset. You have the choice to make and change your mind, not someone else. You do. So make that change. Wait a second.
Yeah.
Did Michael Jackson say something like that in one of his songs? Man in the Mirror or something. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, really, again, I just want to say thank you because this has been inspirational. And I hope it's an inspiration to people who are going to watch and listen to this. And, everything that I'm going to call you Professor, the Professor Dennis Torres says is, is, is this a word accomplishable? You can accomplish it. It's just open your mind and um, just do it. Don't expect things to come to you because they're not. You have to go get it.
Yeah, there's an old saying that is to the point here that I try to get across too. If you follow your passions in life instead of just doing something for the money, if you follow your passions in life, you will never work a day in your life because you're doing something you love. And if you're doing something you love, the chances are you're going to succeed financially as well. And even if you don't, again, you can get financially self-sufficient, and I'll define wealth as self-sufficient. Okay, you can become financially self-sufficient even with minimum wage. Okay, so follow your passions in life, and you will have a life well lived.
That's a perfect way to close this out. I want to say thank you very much and heed the advice, everyone. Follow your passions, and you
Chuck,
know,
thank you.
you're
I, I'd love to spend more time with you because I feel a connection with you, and I think we could share a lot of fun stories together.